Aphorism 2. The highest ideal of a cure. The subject this morning relates to cure, to what the nature of a cure is. It is stated in the second paragraph of the Organon that the highest ideal of a cure is rapid, gentle, and permanent restoration of the health, or removal and annihilation of the disease in its whole extent, in the shortest, most reliable, and most harmless way, on easily comprehensible principles. If you were to ask a physician who had not been trained in homeopathy of what a cure consists, his mind would only revolve around the idea of the disappearance of the pathological state. If an eruption on the skin were the given instance, the disappearance of the eruption from the skin under his treatment would be called a cure. If hemorrhoids, the removal of these would be called a cure. If constipation, the opening of the bowels would be called a cure. If some affection of the knee joint, an amputation above the knee would be considered a cure. Or if it were an acute disease and the patient did not die, it would be considered a cure of the disease. And that is really the idea of the patient as it is derived from the physician. The patient will often wonder at the great skill of the physician in removing an eruption from the skin, and will go back again when the graver manifestations, the tissue changes threatening death, have come on as a consequence, and will say to the doctor, "You so wonderfully cured me of my skin disease, why cannot you cure of my liver trouble?" But this very scientific ignorant doctor has made a failure. He has driven what was upon the surface and harmless into the innermost precincts of the economy, and the patient is going to die as a result of scientific ignorance. There are three distinct points involved in this paragraph, and these must be brought out. Restoring health, and not the removing of symptoms, is the first point. Restoring health has in view the establishment of order in a sick human being. Removing symptoms has not in view a human being. Removing the constipation, the hemorrhoids, the white swelling of the knee, the skin disease, or any local manifestation or particular sign of disease, or even the removal of a group of symptoms, does not have in view the restoration to health of the whole economy of man. If the removal of symptoms is not followed by a restoration to health, it cannot be called a cure. We learned in our last study that the sole duty of the physician is to heal the sick, and therefore it is not his duty merely to remove the symptoms, to change the aspect of the symptoms, the appearance of the disease image, imagining that he has thereby established order. What a simple-minded creature he must be! What a groveler in muck and mire he must be, when he can meditate upon doing such things, even a moment! How different his actions would be if he but considered that every violent change which he produces in the aspect of the disease aggravates the interior nature of the disease, aggravates the sickness of the man, and brings about an increase of suffering within him. The patient should be able to realize by his feelings and continue to say that he is being restored to health whenever a symptom is removed. There should be a corresponding inward improvement whenever an outward symptom has been caused to disappear, and this will be true whenever disease has been displaced by order. The perfection of a cure consists then first in restoring health, and this is to be done promptly, mildly, and permanently, which is the second point. The cure must be quick or speedy, it must be gentle, and it must be continuous or permanent. Whenever an outward symptom has been caused to disappear by violence, as by cathartics to remove constipation, it cannot be called mild or permanent, even if it is prompt. Whenever violent drugs are resorted to, there is nothing mild in the action or the reaction that must follow. At the time this second paragraph of the Organon was written, physicking was not so mild as at the present day. Bloodletting, sweating, etc. were in vogue at the time Hahnemann wrote these lines. Medicine has changed somewhat in its appearance. Physicians are now using sugar-coated pills and contriving to make medicines appear tasteless or tasteful. They are using concentrated alkaloids. But none of these things have been done because of the discovery of any principle. Bloodletting and sweating were not abandoned on account of principle. For the old men deprecate their disuse and often say they hope the time will come when they can again go back to the lancet. But the drugs of today are 10 times more powerful than those formerly used, because more concentrated. The cocaine, sulfonal, and numerous other modern concentrated products of the manufacturing chemists are extremely dangerous, and their real action and reaction unknown. The chemical discoveries of petroleum have opened a field of destruction to human intelligence, to the understanding, and to the will, because these products are slowly and insidiously violent. When drugs were used that were instantly dangerous and violent, the action was manifest. It showed upon the surface, and the common people saw it. But the patient of the present day goes through more dangerous drugging because it destroys the mind. The apparent benefits produced by these drugs are never permanent. They may in some cases seem to be permanent, but then it is because upon the economy has been engrafted a new and most insidious disease, more subtle and more tenacious than the manifestation that was upon the externals, and it is because of this tenacity that the original symptoms remain away. The disease in its nature, its essay, has not been changed. It is still there, causing the internal destruction of the man, but its manifestation has been changed, and there has been added to this natural disease a drug disease, more serious than the former. The manner of cure can only be mild if it flows in the stream of natural direction, establishing order and thereby removing disease. The direction of old-fashioned medicine is like pulling a cat up a hill by the tail, whereas the treatment that is mild, gentle, and permanent flows with the stream, scarcely producing a ripple. It adjusts the internal disorder, and the outermost of man returns to order. Everything becomes orderly from the interior. The curative medicine does not act violently upon the economy, but establishes its action in a mild manner. But while the action is mild and gentle, very often that which follows, which is the reaction, is a turmoil, especially when the work of traditional medicine is being undone and former states are being re-established. Let's start with the third point, upon principles that are at once plain and intelligible. That's a fancy way of saying that the rules of homeopathy are simple and clear. You don't need to be a genius to get them. They're straightforward and make sense. Kent goes on to say that these principles are like laws, fixed and certain, kind of like the law of gravity. You know how gravity always pulls things down, no matter what. Homeopathy's principles are just as reliable. They don't change or shift around. Now here's where it gets interesting. Kent says these principles aren't about guessing or experimenting randomly. That's what he means by not guesswork, empiricism, or roundabout methods. Homeopathy isn't about trying something just to see if it works, or following the latest drug trends pushed by manufacturers. Instead, it's built on solid, proven rules. Kent also points out that these principles have never changed. They've always been the same, and always will be. Imagine having a recipe that works perfectly every time, and you never need to tweak it. That's what homeopathy's principles are like, consistent and dependable. So, what's the big deal about learning these principles? Kent says it's super important to really get to know them, study them carefully, understand the medicines that never change their effects, and figure out exactly how they work. It's like learning the tools of the trade with precision. In fact, Kent says this is the most important goal of studying homeopathy, getting familiar with these rules and how to use them. It's not just about memorizing stuff, it's about understanding the system that helps people get better. Here's the cool part. Kent says that when you learn these principles and keep using them, they grow brighter and stronger. That means the more you practice homeopathy this way, the better you get at it. It's like riding a bike. The more you do it, the easier and more natural it feels. And what's all this for? The big goal of these fixed principles is to help people heal. Kent says it's about removing disease and restoring health in a way that's gentle, fast, and lasts a long time. Homeopathy isn't about harsh treatments or quick fixes that don't stick. It's about real, lasting wellness. So, to sum it up, homeopathy is based on clear, unchanging principles that anyone can understand. These rules are like a steady foundation, reliable and time-tested. By learning and practicing them, homeopaths can help people heal gently and permanently. Pretty neat, right? If one were to ask an allopathic graduate in this class how he could demonstrate that he had cured somebody, the answer could only be such as I have mentioned already, that the patient did not die or that the manifestations prescribed for had disappeared. If one were to ask a physician trained in homeopathic principles the same question, one would find that there are means of distinctly demonstrating why he knows his patient is better. You would naturally expect, if it is the interior of man that is disordered in sickness, and not his tissues primarily, that the interior must first be turned into order, and the exterior last. The first of man is his voluntary, and the second of man is his understanding. The last of man is his outermost, from his center to his circumference, to his organs, his skin, hair, nails, etc. This being true, the cure must proceed from center to circumference. From center to circumference is from above downward, from within outwards, from more important to less important organs, from the head to the hands and feet. Every homeopathic practitioner who understands the art of healing knows that symptoms which go off in these directions remain away permanently. Moreover, he knows that symptoms which disappear in the reverse order of their coming are removed permanently. It is thus he knows that the patient did not merely get well in spite of the treatment, but that he was cured by the action of the remedy. If a homeopathic physician goes to the bedside of a patient and upon observing the onset of the symptoms and the course of the disease, sees that the symptoms do not follow this order after his remedy, homeopathic doctor knows something's off. The remedy didn't really fix the root of the problem. So it's not enough for the symptoms to just vanish. They have to vanish in the right way. That's how a homeopathic doctor can say, yes, my remedy cured this person. In homeopathy, chronic diseases start on the surface and move inward to vital organs. When a patient heals, the symptoms move back outward from the vital organs to the surface. This is called the direction of cure. What happens when you give a remedy? If you give the right homeopathic remedy, symptoms that were deep inside may shift back to the surface. This is a good sign. It means the patient is recovering even if they feel uncomfortable. Example, a patient with heart rheumatism might get joint pain again after the remedy. This shows the heart is improving. Why is this important? Suppressing surface symptoms like joint pain with strong treatments like lotions or drugs can push the disease deeper, making it worse. If the doctor doesn't understand this and suppresses the returning joint pain, the disease goes back to the heart, and the patient could die. Simple example. Think of the body like an onion. Disease moves from outer layers to inner layers. Healing peels it back out. symptoms return to the outer layers. If a patient says, "My old knee pain is back," it's a sign they're getting better, not worse. Now, important points to remember. Disease progression from surface to center. Direction of cure from center to surface. Old surface symptoms coming back means recovery. Suppressing surface symptoms drives disease deeper and harms the patient. Old incurable cases show more discomfort during healing than acute ones. Incurable cases. Even if a patient can't be fully cured, moving symptoms from vital organs to less vital areas still helps and is the best outcome possible. It requires a little explanation to the patient, and if he is intelligent enough to understand it, he will wait for the remedy to act. But the physician, who thinks most of his pocketbook, will say, "If I don't give him a liniment to put on that limb, he will go off and get another physician." Now let me tell you, right here is the beginning of evil. You had better trust to the intelligence of humanity, and trust that he will stay and be cured. If you have learned to prescribe for the patient even though he suffer, if you have learned what is right and do not do it, it is a violation of conscience. Kent explains about a person's integrity. That's just a big word for being honest and doing what's right. He mentions principles that are at once plain and intelligible. What does that mean? It means the rules of homeopathy are straightforward and easy to understand. Nothing too fancy or confusing. But here's the catch. Kent says if you toss integrity out the window and think you can do whatever you want, you're throwing away those principles, and with them, any chance of being successful. It's like saying, "I don't need rules." Well, without rules, things fall apart. On the flip side, Kent explains what happens when a homeopath does follow these principles with integrity. Here's the good stuff. They get really smart about remedies. They study the materia medica, that's like the homeopathy recipe book, and learn how to use it well. They help people heal. By sticking to the rules, they can make diseases go away. They earn respect. Patients like and trust them because they're good at what they do and care about doing it right. They feel good inside. Kent calls this a clear conscience. It's that happy feeling you get when you know you've done the right thing. Kent says this makes their work most delightful. It's not just a job, it's something they love because they're making a real difference. Living the right way. Now Kent goes a bit deeper. He talks about living an orderly life. He believes that to be healthy and to heal others, you need to live in a way that's natural and good. He gives an example of what he thinks is not good. Things like trying to avoid having kids. In his time, this might mean using contraception or other tricks to stop pregnancies. Kent's point is that these vices, his word for bad habits, mess with nature's plan. He thinks if people keep doing stuff like this, they won't fully heal from long-term illnesses, what he calls chronic diseases. So it's not just about taking medicine, it's about how you live too. Kent puts a big responsibility on homeopaths. He says it's their job to teach patients how to live this orderly life. If a doctor doesn't get this themselves, if they don't know what order means, they can't be trusted. Imagine a teacher who doesn't know the subject they're teaching. Would you listen to them? So, the homeopath has to lead by example. They need to live with integrity and encourage their patients to do the same. It's all connected. Good living and good health go hand in hand. So, that's Kent's big idea. It's not just about being a great doctor, it's about being a good person too. It is the duty of the physician then, first to find out what is in man that is disorder, and then to restore him to health. And this return to health, which is a perfect cure, is to be accomplished by means that are mild, that are orderly, that flow gently like the life force itself, turning the internal of man into order, with fixed principles as his guide, and by the homeopathic remedy,